The morning felt hollow, the kind that pressed against your chest and whispered that something was missing. Outside, a cold wind scraped against the cracked windows of Miller's diner. The sky hung low and gray, swallowing the sun before it could rise. Inside, the smell of burnt coffee and buttered toast floated through the air, mingling with the silence of another lonely day. At a booth in the far corner, where nobody sat unless they had nowhere else to go, an old woman rested her trembling hands around a chipped teacup. Her name was Eleanor Hayes, a woman who wore grief like a second skin. Every morning, she came alone. Always the same black coat. Always the same silver feather brooch that shimmered faintly against the dull light. She stared out the window as if waiting for someone who would never return. Across the room, a young waitress named Mara Weaver watched her. Mara was only 26 but already carried the weariness of a lifetime. She had grown up with little, survived more than most, and still managed to smile like she believed the world could be kind. She didn't have much, an old apartment, broken dreams, and a paycheck that vanished before the month ended, but she had a heart that refused to give up on goodness, and maybe that's why she noticed Eleanor when no one else did. Two souls, one at the end of her story, the other still struggling to write hers, about to prove that sometimes, the smallest act of kindness can awaken the brightest light in the darkest morning. The diner's clock ticked lazily above the counter, its rhythm blending with the soft hum of the refrigerator. The few customers who came in that morning barely spoke. The rain outside had turned to sleet, tapping faintly against the windows like a quiet reminder that winter had come early. Eleanor Hayes sat where she always did, in the corner booth by the window. She ordered nothing more than tea and dry toast. Her fingers shook as she counted coins from her worn leather purse, lining them neatly on the table before handing them to Mara. Just tea today? Mara asked gently. Eleanor nodded without lifting her eyes. Yes, dear. That's all. Mara wanted to say something, to ask if she was all right, if she had anyone waiting for her at home, but the diner had taught her that some silences weren't meant to be broken. So instead, she smiled. I'll bring it right over. When Mara returned, she slipped an extra muffin onto the plate. On the house, she said cheerfully. We're testing new recipes. Eleanor looked up for the first time. You shouldn't. Mara shrugged, her smile never fading. Too late. For a moment, the old woman's lips trembled. Then she nodded softly, almost in gratitude, that became their unspoken routine. Day after day, Mara would find small ways to brighten Eleanor's mornings. Warm toast instead of cold, tea refilled before the cup emptied, and sometimes, a soft napkin folded into the shape of a flower. She didn't do it for thanks. She did it because she knew what it felt like to be invisible. Mara's own life was stitched together by struggle. She lived in a one-room apartment above a laundromat, where the hum of dryers lulled her to sleep. Her parents had died when she was 10, leaving her to the foster system. Love had been a stranger for most of her life. Yet she still believed in kindness, not because it was easy, but because it was all she had left to give. Over time, their quiet bond grew. Eleanor began to talk, just a little. She told Mara about how she used to live near the ocean, how she would read novels by lamplight, and how her husband once said her laughter could light up a room. But when Mara asked about her family, Eleanor's eyes clouded over, and the conversation would end. Then, one icy morning, Mara found Eleanor with tears glistening on her cheeks. Are you all right? She asked softly. Eleanor hesitated, then whispered, They've taken my apartment. I have nowhere to go tonight. Mara's chest tightened. The thought of this fragile woman sleeping in a cold bus station tore at her heart. Without a second thought, she said, You're coming with me. Eleanor shook her head. No, I couldn't. You can, Mara interrupted. Please. That night, Eleanor followed her home. The small apartment smelled of detergent and cinnamon tea. Mara cleared space, gave Eleanor her bed, and slept on the couch. For the next week, she shared her meals, washed Eleanor's clothes, and helped her fill out assistance forms. Why are you doing this? Eleanor asked one evening, her eyes misting. Mara smiled faintly. Because no one helped me when I needed it. But I survived because I believed someone would, someday. Eleanor reached out, squeezing her hand. You have a good heart, dear. Days passed in quiet comfort. Then, one morning, Eleanor didn't come to the diner. The next day, still no sign. By the third, Mara's stomach twisted with fear. After her shift, she rushed home, but Eleanor was gone. The room was spotless, the bed neatly made, and on the pillow, a folded note waited, "Thank you for giving me back hope. Eleanor." No address. No explanation. Just those words. Mara sank to the floor, clutching the note. For weeks, she checked shelters, called hospitals, even asked the police if they'd seen her. Nothing. The world moved on, but Mara couldn't. It felt like losing family, again. Then, one gray Tuesday morning, the diner's door chimed open, and everything changed. Outside, a convoy of black SUVs rolled to a stop. Men in tailored suits stepped inside, their presence slicing through the diner's sleepy calm. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. One of them, a tall man with sharp eyes, scanned the room. "Is there a Mara Weaver here?" Mara froze. "That's me. Miss Weaver," the man said, his tone respectful. "We've been instructed to escort you somewhere. Please come with us." The entire diner watched in stunned silence as Mara was led outside. Fear and confusion tangled inside her as she climbed into the SUV. The city blurred past the window until they entered a world she'd only seen on television: tall gates, trimmed hedges, mansions that seemed to float in silence. The car stopped before a grand estate wrapped in ivy and winter fog. Inside, soft piano music drifted through the halls. Gold-framed paintings glimmered in the candlelight. Mara followed the men into a sunroom overlooking a snow-covered garden, and there, sitting gracefully in a lavender dress, was Eleanor Hayes. Mara gasped. "Eleanor?" Eleanor smiled, eyes bright with tears. "Hello, dear." Mara couldn't move. I thought you were." "I know," Eleanor interrupted gently. "And I'm sorry for leaving without a word. But I needed to make sure." "Make sure of what?" "That your kindness was real." She took Mara's hands, her touch warm and steady. Eleanor explained everything. She wasn't a homeless widow. She was the heir to Hayes International, one of the country's largest private firms. 2 years ago, her husband and only son were killed in an accident. Grief consumed her, and the fortune around her felt like a prison. So she vanished, gave up her identity to live among ordinary people, to see if compassion still existed beyond money. "And then I met you," Eleanor said softly. "You who had so little but gave me everything: warmth, food, and the belief that goodness still lives in this world." Tears filled Mara's eyes. "You don't owe me anything." "Oh, but I do," Eleanor interrupted gently. "You reminded me that life is still worth living." She reached into her pocket and handed Mara an envelope. Inside was a letter and a set of keys. "I don't need a maid or a nurse," Eleanor said. "I need a heart I can trust. I want you by my side, not as an employee, but as family. Everything I own will one day be yours, not because of blood, but because of love." Mara stood speechless, tears spilling freely. For the first time in her life, she wasn't invisible. The two women embraced, one finding redemption, the other finding home. Outside, the sun broke through the clouds, painting the snow with light. If this story touched your heart, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to Kindness Corner. Because sometimes, all it takes is one act of kindness to turn a stranger into family, to turn loneliness into love, and to remind the world that no one is ever truly forgotten.